Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Another day, another installment in the Russian election soap opera. This one, an unexpected plot twist. Earlier today, Donald Trump Jr. released an email exchange he had last summer with an English publicist named Ron Goldstone. Now, Goldstone had offered Trump a meeting with a Russian lawyer called Natalia Veselnitskaya. Pronounced that twice. He claimed she had incriminating information about Hillary Clinton's dealings with Russia. Now, Don Trump took the bait and met with Veselnitskaya some weeks later, though he complained later that she had nothing interesting to say during the meeting and instead just talked about Russian adoption law. Goldstone, meanwhile, emailed Trump Jr. to claim, without offering any evidence to support it, that the Russian government supported his father, Donald Trump's presidential campaign. Now, Don Trump released all those emails a little before noon today, and within minutes, the Congressional Treason Caucus swung into action to accuse Donald Trump Jr. of betraying his country.
We're now beyond obstruction of justice in terms of what's being investigated. This is moving into perjury, false statements, and even into potentially treason.
So, according to a sitting member of Congress, gossiping with foreigners now qualifies as treason in America, even if no meaningful information is exchanged. You ought to consider that before you allow an exchange student to live in your house. It could be a bigger risk than you think. Later tonight, Donald Trump Jr. will be going on Sean Hannity's show to explain his side of things.
Honestly, my takeaway when all of this was going on is that someone has information on our opponent. You know, things are going a million miles an hour. You know what it's like to be on a campaign. We just won Indiana, but we're talking about a contested convention. Things are going a million miles an hour again. And, hey, wait a minute. I've heard about all these things, but maybe this is something. I should hear him out.
Did you tell your father anything about this?
No. It was such a nothing. There was nothing to tell. I mean, I wouldn't have even remembered it until you start scouring through the stuff. It was literally just a wasted 20 minutes, which was a shame.
Now, that full interview airs just ahead at 10, and you can decide for yourself what you think. But before then, consider what we know now, what Donald Trump Jr. did. A publicist emailed him to say his client had damaging information about a political opponent. Trump met with the client. Apparently, he learned nothing during that meeting. For that, he's an enemy of the state guilty of a capital crime. Now, if that is true, we've reached a new level of hysteria that could be dangerous to an awful lot of people, and not just the Trump family. How many lobbyists in Washington routinely meet with foreign agents who are seeking to influence American policy? Well, most of them, probably. It's going on right now as we speak in dozens of restaurants in D.C., literally all over the city, because that's standard here and has been for a long time. And yet, by these new standards, all of those people are now facing the possibility of lethal injection. They ought to be worried about that. But here's the most interesting thing about today's story. What was the damaging information this publicist offered Don Trump Jr. about Hillary Clinton? Well, according to the email we saw today, it was, we're quoting, official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary and her dealings with Russia. In an interview today, the Russian lawyer in question says the only question she got from Donald Trump Jr. during that meeting was whether the DNC had received illegal funding from Russia. So in other words, the Trump people believed the Hillary people were colluding with Russia. Meanwhile, of course, the Hillary people thought the Trump people were doing the same thing. So each side believed the other was in bed with Vladimir Putin. It's like a comedy sketch. It would be funny, actually, if Democrats weren't suddenly talking about death penalty offenses. Brit Hume has been in Washington a long time. That's why he's Fox's senior political analyst, and he joins us now for some perspective. Is this a death penalty offense, do you think?
No, I think not. But I do think it does certainly suggest a willingness on the part of some of those associated with Trump, particularly his younger son, to collude with Russia if someone from Russia had information from the Russian government, as the email suggested, that would be damaging to Hillary Clinton.
Is receiving information the same as colluding?
Well, it could be so construed, but the point is the problem with the whole scenario about collusion being suggested by this is that apparently no information was exchanged, no information was obtained. So if you even were to take the negative interpretation to say this showed a willingness to collude, the collusion didn't occur, at least so far as we know. Now, if it later turns out down the road that out of this meeting, unbeknownst to or at least things turn out that we haven't heard about that suggest that something did come of it and that information was provided and it was provided courtesy of the Kremlin, that would be a different matter entirely. But so far, we don't have that. What we have so far is a meeting that apparently went nowhere. It suggests a certain level of naivete, at least on the part of young Mr. Trump, who should have known that if he gets an approach that appears to be from the Putin government, that he probably ought to be careful about taking the meeting. And wouldn't you love, Tucker, to hear what Paul the campaign manager has to say. Paul Manafort has to say about this. He was in the meeting, and the Russian lawyer described him. Jared Kushner was there too. Apparently, he got up after 7 minutes and left. Right. And Manafort is described as having sat there on his telephone the whole time and paying no attention. But nonetheless, he's been around a long time. He's been on a lot of campaigns. He would know that what might be an approach from a foreign government was something you have to be careful with, which apparently young Mr. Trump didn't realize.
What's so interesting to me, though, and as a lifelong resident of Washington, maybe you can vouch for this perception, there's a lot of foreign influence on U.S. government policy going on in Washington all the time. Everyone I know is taking money from a foreign government, it seems like. And Russia's not on the top 10 list of governments that influence our policy.
No, I think, that's not quite the issue. Obviously, the ambassadors from nations all over the world are here, as we are in their countries, for the purposes of protecting our interests and thereby affecting the policies of those governments. The Russian ambassador has been a man about town in Washington for as long as I can remember, whoever he might have been. And Sergei Kislyak, who is the one with whom some of the Trump people had some meetings, was certainly in that vein. I saw him, you may have heard me say to you, last time I was in the Senate dining room, he was having lunch in there with Dianne Feinstein, and they were discussing who knows what. I never thought twice about it, and nor would anyone else. So contacts are one thing, and they're not by themselves illegitimate. But when someone acting during a presidential campaign on behalf of a foreign government, seeking apparently to help one candidate against another and to influence the campaign in that direction, that is something we have to be concerned about. The thing is, it doesn't appear to have come to anything.
What's so striking, though, is the Trump campaign clearly believed, and the Russian lawyer and her publicist, Goldstone in England, were hoping the Trump campaign would believe that the Hillary campaign was colluding with Russia. It does seem like both sides thought the same thing of the other.
Yeah, that's one of the amusing ironies of this whole thing, that each side thought the other was guilty of playing patty cake with Russian interests.
Is there an investigation into whether or not the Hillary people were indeed colluding with the Russian government?
Well, who knows?
Good
because
point.
What such investigations as are going on inside the Justice Department, headed by Mr. Mueller, are going whatever direction he chooses to take them. We have no evidence so far that any alleged Hillary Clinton campaign collusion with the Russians is a piece of it, but who knows?
You know, it'd be so fun, since we're on this topic, in this vein, and we're all on the lookout for agent provocateurs from foreign countries, is to kind of get forensic about what American policies are influenced by foreign governments, what kind of money changes hands in Washington, how many people are lobbying on behalf of foreign interests, registered or not, legally or not. There's a lot of that.
Well, there is. And look, I'm one of the people in this town who have come to take a somewhat contrarian view about lobbying. Lobbyists are universally denounced by everybody.
Yes.
Lobbying is a constitutionally protected practice. It is seeking redress of grievances, right?
Yes.
Petition for the government for redress of grievances. And if we didn't have a government that reached into every corner of American life and every nook and cranny of people's lives, we wouldn't have the squads of lobbyists that we have in this town. In a lot of cases, what lobbyists are here for is self-defense. In a lot of cases, what lobbyists are here for is to protect government subsidies that may be coming or other benefits that may be flowing to the entities that they represent. But it is a perfectly natural, constitutionally protected practice. And very often, when Congress is in one of its fits, it is the lobbyists who know the territory and know how things are going to play out who save the day by warning them, if you go there, this is what's going to happen. So let's hear it for lobbyists, and to some extent, let's hear it for ambassadors.
That is a contrarian view. Brit, Hume, thank you.
You bet, Tucker.